On the jagged edge of Maine's rugged coastline, where the Atlantic's icy breath swept over cliffs draped in thick pine and bracken, Jake Carter found solace. The small town of Harborside was a place where time seemed to slow, its winding streets and weathered fishing shacks holding stories whispered by salt and wind. Here, the ocean's endless rhythm mingled with the cries of gulls, crafting a soundtrack that soothed a soul weary from battle. Jake sat quietly on the worn wooden porch of his modest home, a cabin weathered by years of sea salt and storms. The paint peeled in places, revealing raw wood beneath. But it was home, a sanctuary from the chaos he'd left behind. His dark eyes scanned the horizon, where the gray sky met restless waves, and for a moment, the memories of distant deserts and firefights softened into the steady pulse of the tide. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. The former Navy SEAL had returned months ago, seeking refuge in simplicity. After tours that felt like lifetimes, filled with loss and relentless danger, he was determined to find peace in the quiet corners of this coastal town. The porch, with its creaking boards and faded rocking chair, became his refuge. Each morning, he'd sit here with a steaming cup of black coffee, the sharp chill of sea air filling his lungs, grounding him in a world that felt less fractured. Harborside was a town stitched together by generations of fishermen and their families, where everyone knew each other's names and stories. The local diner bustled with familiar faces, and the harbor bustled with boats bobbing gently in their slips. Yet despite the town's gentle pace, Jake carried a guardedness beneath his calm exterior, a vigilance honed over years of combat, a watchfulness that never fully rested. As the sun struggled to peek through a blanket of slate-gray clouds, Jake's gaze dropped to the porch steps littered with fallen pine needles. He shifted in his chair, eyes narrowing as a sudden movement caught his attention. There, curled into a tight ball just beyond the porch, was a dog, a medium-sized, scruffy mutt with matted fur and eyes that flickered with pain and fear. The animal's ribs showed through its coat, and a dark stain marred its side, a wound fresh and raw. The dog lifted its head weakly, its gaze meeting Jake's with a quiet desperation. Despite the chill, the creature shivered, too exhausted to move. Instinct took hold, years of training and compassion blending into one. Jake rose carefully, hands steady despite the sudden surge of concern. He knelt slowly, careful not to startle the animal. "Hey there, buddy," he murmured, voice low and steady. The dog's eyes flickered warily, but didn't retreat. Reaching into his jacket pocket, Jake pulled out a scrap of cloth, softened by use, and gently began to clean the wound, careful not to cause further pain. As he worked, Jake noticed a small metal tag hanging from a frayed collar. The tag was unusual, engraved with a series of numbers and a phone number beneath, along with an address in faded lettering. The sight of it sparked a flicker of curiosity beneath his concern. Who had left this dog here, wounded and alone, on his porch? The wind picked up, carrying the briny tang of the ocean and the distant calls of seabirds. Jake's mind drifted briefly to the missions he'd left behind, the sudden ambushes, the silent nights and hostile territory. But here, in this quiet town, the danger was different, subtler. Something about this dog's presence unsettled him, a silent summons he couldn't ignore. He lifted the dog gently, hauling it inside where the warmth from the small wood stove softened the chill in the room. The dog's labored breathing filled the silence as Jake fetched a bowl of water and a rag, to tend to the wound more thoroughly. His hands moved with practiced care, cleaning away grit and blood, his eyes scanning the injury for signs of infection or bullet fragments. The dog whimpered softly, but didn't resist. It was clear it trusted him, or at least had no other choice. Jake's military discipline battled with a softer instinct, a need to protect, to heal. He settled the animal on an old blanket, then moved to the cluttered kitchen counter to call the number etched into the tag. The phone rang sharply, slicing through the quiet of the cabin. After several rings, a voice answered, guarded, terse. "Who's this?" the voice demanded, clipped and distant. Jake hesitated, then introduced himself calmly. "I found your dog," he said. "It's hurt, and I want to make sure it's okay." There was a pause, then a breathy warning. "You don't want to get involved. Let it go, Jake. It's better for everyone." The voice was unfamiliar, but the warning was clear, laced with a threat hidden beneath the veneer of concern. Jake's jaw tightened. He repeated his offer, voice steady. "I'm not just going to leave it out there. Someone's hurt this dog. I want to help." The line went dead, leaving a cold silence hanging in the air. Jake stared at the phone, his mind racing. The evasive tone, the warning to back off, it was a signal, a red flag in a place that seemed so peaceful. Yet beneath that peaceful surface, there was something darker, a hidden story that the wounded dog had brought to his doorstep. He glanced back at the animal lying quietly on the blanket. The dog's breathing was shallow, but steady, eyes fluttering as if battling exhaustion. Jake's resolve hardened. This wasn't just a stray or a lost pet. This was a message, a thread leading to a mystery he couldn't ignore. Outside, the wind howled softly through the pines, carrying with it the cold bite of the sea. The ocean's relentless rhythm seemed to pulse in tandem with Jake's thoughts, a reminder that beneath the calm there was always a tide rising, ready to sweep away the shallow peace. Jake settled back on the porch as twilight deepened, the sky now a smudged canvas of grays and blues. He wrapped his coat tighter around his broad shoulders, eyes scanning the darkening street. Harborside's quiet streets seemed unchanged, but he knew better. Somewhere beneath the surface, secrets stirred. The dog, now resting with a fragile trust, was the first sign, a silent call to action. And Jake, a man who had faced danger in the world's most hostile places, felt the old spark of purpose awaken. In this small coastal town, amid the chill and the salt air, a new mission was beginning, one that would test not only his strength, but his heart. As night settled, the porch light flickered softly, casting long shadows on the worn wood. The town slept, unaware that the quiet had been broken. And Jake, once a soldier battling distant wars, was about to confront a fight much closer to home. The morning light filtered weakly through the fog that clung to the cliffs surrounding Harborside, casting a muted silver glow over Jake's porch. The wounded dog stirred, lifting its head with a faint whimper. Jake moved quietly, careful not to startle it as he prepared a makeshift bed near the wood stove. The cold outside was relentless, but inside the cabin, the warmth was steady, a small shield against the chill. The dog's breathing was shallow but steady, each rise and fall of its chest marked by a flicker of pain. Jake's fingers brushed gently over the matted fur, feeling the heat beneath the skin and the stiffened muscle around the wound. He could tell it had been shot recently, the jagged edge of the injury raw and inflamed. The sight tightened something in his chest, a mix of anger and sympathy. He reached for his phone again, scrolling to the number etched on the dog's tag. The memory of the clipped voice from last night lingered, uncertain and threatening. Still, Jake's curiosity outweighed caution. This dog was a lifeline, a piece of a puzzle he was determined to solve. Before calling, he jotted down the address engraved on the tag. An old mill house on the outskirts of town, near the abandoned docks. The place had a reputation for being deserted, a relic of Harborside's fading industry. Jake's mind raced with questions. Who had left the dog here? Why was it shot? And what secrets were tied to that quiet, crumbling house? The phone buzzed in his hand, and Jake took a deep breath before dialing. The line rang twice before a hesitant voice answered. Hello? Jake introduced himself again, careful to keep his tone steady. I'm calling about the dog I found. I want to make sure it's okay. The voice on the other end was evasive, a low murmur that barely masked suspicion. Look, you don't know what you're getting into. That dog, it's not just some stray. It's trouble. Jake frowned, the knot in his gut tightening. What do you mean? Who owns it? Can't say, the voice replied, then added with a note of warning. Leave it alone, Jake. Some things are better left buried. Before Jake could respond, the line went dead. The abrupt silence echoed in the small cabin, heavier than any threat spoken aloud. He stared at the phone, weighing the implications. This wasn't a friendly warning. It was a barrier. Someone didn't want him poking around. He looked back at the dog, its amber eyes meeting his. There was trust there, fragile but real, and a silent plea for help. Jake's instincts, sharpened by years in the military, told him this was no accident. The dog had been left for a reason, perhaps as a message or a clue. Deciding to take matters into his own hands, Jake gathered a few essentials: a flashlight, his worn leather jacket, and a first aid kit to tend to the dog's wounds more thoroughly. Wrapping the animal gently in a blanket, he stepped outside into the damp morning air. The fog clung thickly to the narrow streets and weather-beaten houses, muffling sound and casting eerie shadows. The walk to the mill house was slow and deliberate. Jake carried the dog carefully, mind alert to every creak and whisper of the town waking up. The path wound past empty docks where fishing boats bobbed silently, their nets hanging like silent sentinels. Seagulls wheeled overhead, their cries cutting through the fog. As he approached the dilapidated building, its boarded windows and rusted siding told stories of neglect and time. The place looked deserted, but signs of recent activity caught his eye. Fresh footprints in the mud, discarded cigarette butts near the door. Someone had been here not long ago. Jake set the dog down gently on the cracked wooden porch, eyes scanning the surroundings. He noticed a rusted mailbox with peeling paint, marked only with faded letters. The address matched the one on the tag. His pulse quickened. This was the place. He pushed open the creaking door, the sound sharp in the stillness. Inside, dust motes danced in the weak sunlight, filtering through grime-covered windows. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and forgotten memories. Furniture lay overturned, and broken glass glittered on the floor like shards of frozen rain. Signs of a struggle were evident. Scattered papers, a chair knocked askew, and dark stains marring the faded carpet. Jake's military training kicked in as he moved cautiously through the house, every sense alert. The silence was oppressive, but the evidence was clear. Someone had been here, and not peacefully. His mind raced, connecting dots he couldn't yet see in full. Was this linked to the dog's injury? Had the owner been here recently? Or was this a place where danger had been born and left behind? He found a small desk against the far wall, cluttered with yellowed documents and a cracked photograph. The image showed a man and a woman standing beside a boat, smiles frozen in time. Jake's fingers brushed over the worn edges, feeling the weight of stories untold. Among the papers was a notebook, its pages filled with hurried scribbles and a list of names, dates, and cryptic notes. As Jake flipped through the notebook, a chill ran down his spine. The entries hinted at something more than just personal records. Mentions of shipments, coded references, and a name that stood out, Redwood Corp. The corporation was known in town for its influence, but rumors swirled about its darker dealings, whispered in hushed tones at the local diner. Jake's thoughts were interrupted by a faint noise, a shuffling sound from the back of the house. He turned sharply, heart pounding. The dog growled low, a warning rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. Jake's hand instinctively moved to the pocket where he kept a small folding knife, his eyes straining in the dim light. "Hello?" he called out, voice steady but edged with caution. No answer came, only the soft sound of movement retreating deeper into the shadows. Jake followed carefully, the dog at his heels, every muscle coiled for action. In the far corner of the basement, he found overturned crates and more signs of recent disturbance. A hastily discarded jacket and a crumpled envelope addressed to someone named M. Hayes. Jake pocketed the envelope and climbed back to the main floor, his mind racing. The evidence was mounting. This place was a hub of secrets, and the dog was a thread woven through the tangled web. Someone had tried to silence the truth, leaving a wounded animal as a silent witness. Back outside, the fog had lifted slightly, revealing the jagged coastline and the restless sea beyond. Jake gathered the dog into his arms once more, determination hardening in his gaze. The town's quiet facade masked a deeper danger, but he wasn't about to turn away. As he walked back toward his cabin, the dog's labored breathing softened, a fragile trust growing between man and animal. Jake's instincts told him this was only the beginning, a call to uncover what lay beneath Harborside's peaceful surface. The cold wind whispered through the trees, carrying secrets and warnings alike. But Jake was ready. This wounded dog had found its guardian, and together they would face whatever darkness lingered in the shadows of this coastal town. The cabin was quiet, save for the soft crackle of the wood stove and the faint, labored breathing of the dog nestled in a blanket near the hearth. Jake sat at his makeshift desk, the envelope he'd found at the mill house still folded open before him. The yellowed paper held more questions than answers. Cryptic notes and hastily scrawled names, some circled, others crossed out. His military mind sifted through the breadcrumbs, piecing together a puzzle that was growing darker with every discovery. A knock at the door jolted him from his thoughts. He rose cautiously, the dog stirring but not rising. Outside stood Sheriff Tom Whitaker, a man with a weathered face and a guarded demeanor that never quite reached his eyes. The sheriff's presence was both a relief and a warning, a reminder that in Harborside, authority wore a complicated mask. "Jake," Tom said, his voice low but firm. "We need to talk." Jake nodded, stepping outside into the damp evening air. The fog had thickened again, swallowing the narrow streets and muffling distant sounds. "What's this about, Sheriff?" Tom glanced around before lowering his voice. "Word's out you've been poking around the old mill house. That's not a place for tourists, especially with what's been going on." Jake's gaze sharpened. "What's been going on?" "I found evidence of a struggle, and this dog was shot. Someone's trying to cover something up." The sheriff's eyes flickered with unease. "Look, I'm telling you as a friend, you're stirring up trouble. The town's better off not digging into things that don't concern us." Jake's jaw tightened. "With all due respect, Sheriff, I'm not about to ignore a wounded animal or a house that's been ransacked. Something's wrong here." Tom sighed heavily, the weight of years in a small town pressing down on him. There are things you don't understand, Jake. Some people in Harborside have interests that run deep. Best you leave it alone. But Jake wasn't so easily deterred. I'm not leaving. Not until I know what happened and why that dog was shot. The sheriff's gaze lingered, a flicker of warning in his eyes. You're treading dangerous water. After a tense moment, Tom nodded. I'll keep an eye out. But be careful. Not everyone here wants outsiders stirring the pot. As the sheriff's footsteps faded, Jake returned inside, the dog's eyes following him with a flicker of trust. He set the envelope aside and reached for his phone, dialing the number on the dog's tag once more. The line rang, then was answered by a female voice, guarded and weary. "This is Emma," she said after a brief pause. Jake hesitated but pressed on. "Emma, I found the dog. It's hurt, but I'm taking care of it. We need to talk." There was a pause, then a soft sigh. "I've been trying to find someone who would listen. The dog, it's connected to something bigger than you realize." Jake's interest peaked. "I'm listening." Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. "There's corruption here, illegal dumping, cover-ups. The dog's owner was close to exposing it. That's why it's hurt." Jake's mind raced. "Do you have proof?" "I've been collecting what I can, but it's dangerous. I was followed last week. The people behind this don't want the truth out." Jake's military training kicked in, assessing the risks, the stakes. "Where do we start?" Emma gave him an address, a small cafe on the edge of town, where she met sources in hushed tones. "Come by tomorrow morning. We'll talk more." Jake hung up, the weight of the situation settling in. The dog whimpered softly, and he reached down, running his hand gently over its head. This was more than a wounded animal. It was a key to uncovering a secret Harborside's powerful wanted buried. Later that night, Jake sat by the fire, reviewing the notebook from the mill house. The references to Redwood Corpers and coded shipments now carried new meaning. The pieces were forming a picture of greed and deceit, with innocent lives caught in the crossfire. As he drifted toward a restless sleep, Jake's thoughts returned to the dog and the warnings he'd received. Someone was watching, and their patience was thin. But Jake was no stranger to danger. The quiet coastal town had drawn him back for a reason, and he intended to face the darkness head-on. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying secrets and shadows into the night. Inside, a man and a wounded dog prepared to confront the hidden storms beneath Harborside's calm surface. The sun hung low over the horizon, casting a pale amber light that filtered through the overcast sky as Jake navigated the narrow streets toward the address Emma had given him. The town of Harborside was waking slowly, the muted chatter from the local cafe blending with the distant cry of gulls and the soft slap of waves against the harbor. Despite the calm, Jake's mind churned with unease, the weight of the dog's wound and the cryptic warnings pressing heavily on his thoughts. Emma's name echoed in his memory. From their brief phone call, her voice was steady yet laced with urgency, a quiet resolve that matched his own. He approached the small cafe, a weather-beaten brick building with faded green awnings and a hand-painted sign swinging gently in the breeze. The scent of freshly brewed coffee and baked bread drifted through the open door, mingling with the salty tang of the sea. Inside, the cafe was modest but warm, filled with a handful of early risers nursing steaming mugs and poring over newspapers. Jake scanned the room, his eyes settling on a woman seated near the window. She was in her early 30s, with sharp eyes that flickered between guarded and welcoming, her dark hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. Emma. Jake approached cautiously, pulling out the chair opposite her. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, his voice low but steady. Emma nodded, her gaze steady. "I've been watching you. Most folks don't stick their noses where they don't belong." Jake offered a faint smile. "I've learned a thing or two about digging deeper." She slid a manila folder across the table. "This is what I've managed to uncover so far. Documents, photos, records, illegal dumping by Redwood Corp, environmental violations covered up by local officials. It's worse than anyone wants to admit." Jake opened the folder, scanning the contents. Photographs showed barrels rusting near the shoreline, water samples marked with alarming levels of contaminants, and emails hinting at hush payments. The evidence was damning. Emma's voice lowered. "The missing person case you mentioned, the one quietly closed months ago? It's connected. The victim was close to exposing everything. The dog you found belonged to them." Jake's eyes narrowed. "That explains the shooting. Someone wanted to stop the dog from leading anyone here." Emma nodded grimly. "Exactly. And now, with you involved, I'm afraid we're stirring the hornet's nest." Jake leaned back, absorbing the gravity of the situation. "Local law enforcement? Sheriff Whitaker warned me to back off." Emma's lips tightened. "He's part of the problem. Corruption runs deep. We can't trust the usual channels." Jake's jaw clenched. "Then we do this ourselves." Over the next hour, they pieced together a plan. Emma's knowledge of the town's undercurrents and Jake's tactical skills complemented each other. They would start by interviewing locals who might have witnessed suspicious activity near the mill house and the docks. Then, they'd gather more concrete evidence of Redwood Corp's illegal operations. As they talked, the dog lay quietly at Jake's feet, its breathing steadier but still fragile. Jake reached down, running a hand over its head. The animal's resilience mirrored the determination building between the two unlikely allies. Before parting, Emma handed Jake a burner phone. "For secure communication. We can't risk being tracked or recorded." Jake pocketed the device, appreciating the caution. "Thanks, Emma. I'll check in tomorrow." Outside, the wind had picked up, tugging at loose papers and stirring the leaves. Jake watched as Emma disappeared into the bustling street, a woman caught between courage and caution. Returning to his cabin, Jake's mind replayed the day's revelations. The missing person, the dog's owner, had sacrificed everything to expose a dangerous truth. Now, their legacy rested on the shoulders of a wounded dog and a soldier who refused to back down. Later that evening, as twilight deepened and the sea breeze whispered through the open window, Jake tended once more to the dog's wounds. The animal's amber eyes met his, unspoken gratitude shining through the pain. Outside, the quiet town of Harborside held its breath, unaware that beneath its serene surface, a battle for truth and justice was quietly unfolding. And Jake, guided by resolve and newfound purpose, was ready to face the rising tide. The days that followed were a blur of muted tension and quiet determination. Jake moved through Harborside with a sense of purpose sharpened by the growing weight of secrets he was uncovering. The peaceful coastal town, with its weathered docks and fog-laden mornings, masked a deeper darkness, one that was now pulling him in with relentless force. One afternoon, Jake returned to the mill house, the dog now steadier but still weak, resting in a blanket draped over his shoulder. The place felt different this time, less abandoned, more alive with the subtle signs of recent activity. As he stepped inside, the scent of damp wood and mildew was joined by a faint trace of gasoline and something metallic beneath it. His military instincts flared. This wasn't just neglect. There was a deliberate scene meant to be found. He moved carefully through the rooms, eyes scanning for clues. On the kitchen table lay a half-burned piece of paper, smudged but still legible. It was a list of dates and locations, marked with cryptic annotations, shipment schedules perhaps. Beneath it, a hastily scrawled note caught his eye. Meet at dockside, midnight, bring proof. Jake's mind raced. The note was a summons, an invitation to meet someone involved, or perhaps someone willing to talk. But the risks were clear. Whoever had left this was playing a dangerous game, and Jake was now a piece on their board. As he pocketed the note, a sudden noise made him freeze, a soft creak from upstairs. He drew his knife, moving silently toward the staircase. The dog growled low, a warning that set Jake's senses on high alert. "Who's there?" Jake called out, voice steady but commanding. No answer came, only the sound of retreating footsteps. Jake followed cautiously but found only an empty room, the window cracked open and curtains fluttering in the breeze. Someone had been here, watching or warning him. Back outside, the chill of the evening settled over the town. Jake's thoughts circled back to Redwood Corp, the powerful company at the heart of the mystery. He had spoken with Emma, who had pieced together evidence of illegal dumping and environmental violations linked to them. But now, signs pointed to something more sinister, a concerted effort to silence anyone who got too close to the truth. The local authorities, including Sheriff Whitaker, had made it clear they preferred the matter buried. Corruption ran deep, and Jake realized he was standing against a wall of silence and fear. Determined not to be intimidated, Jake reached out to a few trusted townsfolk, fishermen, shopkeepers, and old friends of the missing person. Their stories, whispered in shadowed corners, painted a picture of threats, bribes, and intimidation. One elderly fisherman, Tom Brady, recalled seeing unfamiliar trucks unloading barrels near the docks late at night, guarded by men who didn't belong to Harborside. Jake documented every detail, his military precision turning scattered rumors into a coherent narrative. The dog, once a helpless victim, had become a silent witness to these dark dealings. Its injury was no accident, but a calculated act to prevent it from leading anyone to the truth. As night fell, Jake prepared for the meeting at the docks. The note weighed heavily in his pocket, a tangible link to the unknown players behind the corruption. He dressed carefully, layering clothes and securing a small flashlight and knife at his belt. The dog, now alert and responsive, followed quietly, sensing the gravity of what was to come. The harbor was shrouded in thick fog, the water lapping softly against the pilings as Jake approached the designated meeting spot. Shadows moved among the crates, figures shifting in the mist. He called out softly, "I'm here," his voice steady but cautious. From the darkness emerged a man, mid-30s, lean, eyes sharp with fear and resolve. He introduced himself as Mark Hayes, a former employee of Redwood Corp, who had turned whistleblower. His story was chilling. "They're dumping toxic waste illegally," Mark explained, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "I tried to expose it, but the company's got people everywhere. Cops, politicians, even some of the town folks. When I got close to the truth, they sent men after me. The dog, it was my only companion, and they shot it to scare me off." Jake listened intently, the pieces falling into place. Mark handed over a flash drive filled with documents, emails, contracts, photos, evidence that could bring Redwood Corp down. But the danger was far from over. "We have to be careful," Mark warned. "They know I'm talking to you." Jake nodded, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. "We'll protect you, and the dog. This ends, one way or another." As they parted, the fog thickened, swallowing Jake as he made his way back home. The night was alive with unseen threats, but also with a flicker of hope. The evidence was real, and with it, a chance to expose the corruption strangling Harborside. Back in his cabin, Jake tended to the dog's wounds once more, the animal's eyes reflecting a fragile trust. The journey ahead was perilous, but he was no stranger to danger. In the quiet of the Maine coast, beneath the looming cliffs and restless sea, a battle for justice had begun, and Jake was ready to fight. The morning dawned cold and gray, the coastal fog weaving through the streets of Harborside like a whispered secret. Jake moved through the town with a quiet determination, the weight of the flash drive from Mark Hayes heavy in his coat pocket. The dog, now alert and steadily recovering, trotted at his side, its amber eyes bright with cautious hope. Together, they navigated the streets toward the small newspaper office where Emma worked, a beacon of truth in a town shadowed by silence. Emma greeted them with a sharp nod, her gaze flickering between Jake and the dog. The office was cramped and cluttered, walls lined with faded headlines and stacks of files. The hum of an old computer filled the room, a lifeline to the outside world. She wasted no time, pulling the flash drive from Jake's hand and plugging it into the machine. The screen flickered to life, revealing emails, contracts, and photographs. Damning evidence of Redwood Corpus illegal dumping and the web of corruption shielding them. "This is exactly what we need," Emma said, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "But we have to be smart. They're watching, and if they catch wind of this, it could get ugly." Jake nodded, his military training sharpening his focus. "We'll need to verify everything, cross-reference dates, locations, and names. If we can connect the dots publicly, it'll be harder for them to silence us." Emma pulled out a worn notebook, filled with her years of investigative work on the town's corruption. "I've been tracking Redwood's movements for a while. They've been dumping waste into the bay under the guise of routine disposal. But these documents prove it's toxic. The local officials, including Sheriff Whitaker, are complicit, turning a blind eye in exchange for favors." Jake's fists clenched. "Then we expose them all." Together, they devised a plan to gather more concrete evidence. Emma would leverage her contacts to set up interviews with locals who had witnessed suspicious activity, while Jake would use his tactical skills to document and secure physical proof: photographs, samples, and recordings. Their combined efforts promised a powerful strike against the entrenched corruption. Over the next few days, the pair worked tirelessly. Emma arranged clandestine meetings with fishermen who spoke in hushed tones of barrels dumped near the reefs, and dock workers who had noticed unusual shipments arriving at odd hours. Jake, armed with a camera and notebook, documented every detail, moving cautiously to avoid attracting unwanted attention. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the cliffs and the sky blazed with streaks of orange and pink, Jake returned to his cabin to find Emma waiting on the porch. Her expression was grim but resolute. "I managed to get an interview with Lorraine Wheeler," Emma said. "She's a former Redwood employee who claims to have witnessed illegal dumping firsthand." Jake's eyes narrowed. "That could be the break we need." Emma nodded. "But she's scared. Said she's been threatened before. We'll have to protect her if she agrees to talk." That night, under the cover of darkness, they met Lorraine in a secluded spot near the docks. The woman's hands trembled as she recounted her story, how she'd seen barrels labeled hazardous being unloaded and dumped into the ocean, how attempts to report it were met with intimidation, and how Redwood's influence had silenced many. Her testimony was powerful, a first-hand account that could sway public opinion and authorities alike. but it came with risk. As they left the meeting, Jake's senses remained alert. Shadows moved in the fog, and the distant hum of a vehicle suggested they were being watched. The dog growled low, a warning that set Jake's nerves on edge. Back at the cabin, Jake and Emma reviewed the evidence, piecing together a narrative that exposed Redwood Corp.'s seekers' reckless disregard for the environment and the community's safety. The dog, once a vulnerable victim, had become a symbol of resilience and hope, a living testament to the truth they were fighting to reveal. Days later, at a town meeting packed with wary residents, Jake and Emma presented their findings. The room buzzed with tension as they laid out the evidence, photos, documents, and Lorraine's testimony, casting light on the shadows that had long hidden corruption. Efforts by Redwood's hired enforcers to intimidate them were met with Jake's calm but firm presence, his military discipline lending weight to their stand. The community, stirred by the revelations, began to rally behind them, voices rising in calls for accountability. Amid the gathering, Sheriff Whitaker's guarded expressions betrayed his unease, signaling the shifting tides in Harborside. The battle lines were drawn, and the fight for justice had moved from whispered warnings to open confrontation. As the meeting adjourned, Jake stepped outside into the crisp night air. The dog sat faithfully at his side, eyes reflecting the flickering streetlights, a silent partner in a struggle that was far from over. The coastal winds carried the promise of change, and with it, the hope that truth and courage could overcome even the deepest shadows. The town hall was packed, the creaking wooden benches filled with Harborside's residents, fishermen, shopkeepers, families, all gathered beneath the low ceiling, their faces a mix of curiosity, skepticism, and simmering anger. The scent of salt and damp wood mingled with the hushed murmurs as Jake and Emma took their places at the front, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. Outside, the late afternoon sun filtered weakly through overcast skies, casting a muted glow that barely reached the dim interior. Jake's gaze swept across the room, noting the wary eyes fixed on them, the subtle shifts of unease as whispers circulated. Among the crowd, he spotted Sheriff Whitaker, his jaw tight, eyes flickering with contained frustration. The sheriff's presence was a reminder that the fight was far from over. A battle not just for truth, but for the soul of the town. Emma began, her voice clear and unwavering despite the tension. She laid out the evidence they had gathered. Photographs of rusting barrels leaking into the bay, documents linking Redwood Corp. to illegal dumping, and testimonies from locals brave enough to speak despite threats. Lorraine Wheeler's recorded account played softly over the crackling speakers. A woman's voice, trembling yet resolute, painting a vivid picture of corruption and cover-ups. The room fell into a heavy silence, the gravity of the revelations settling like a weight. Then, from the back, a murmur grew, a mix of disbelief and rising anger. Some townsfolk, long loyal to Redwood Corp. For jobs and economic stability, voiced doubts, their voices tinged with fear of losing livelihoods. Jake stepped forward, his voice steady and commanding. I understand the fear, but silence won't protect this town. If we let corruption continue, it will destroy the very community we all depend on. A hush followed, broken only by the soft whine of the injured dog at his feet. The animal's presence was a poignant reminder, once a victim of violence meant to silence truth, now a symbol of resilience. Suddenly, a group of men seated near the front shifted uncomfortably. Their tough demeanor belied nervous glances exchanged. These were Redwood's enforcers, hired muscle meant to intimidate and suppress dissent. Their leader, A burly man with a scar trailing down his cheek stood abruptly, voice booming. "This is a witch hunt. Lies designed to scare the honest people. You're playing with fire." Jake met the man's glare without flinching. "We're playing with truth, and the people deserve to know it." Tension crackled in the air, the room teetering on the edge of chaos. But before the enforcers could escalate, Sheriff Whitaker rose, his voice cold and authoritative. "Enough." His eyes locked with Jake's, a silent warning. "This town needs order, not conflict." Jake's jaw tightened, sensing the sheriff's complicity even as he feigned neutrality. Order built on lies isn't order at all. It's oppression. The crowd murmured, torn between loyalty and awakening awareness. Then, a voice from the back, a young woman, fierce and clear, spoke up. "We've lived in fear too long. It's time to stand up." More voices followed, growing louder, the tide turning. The community's resolve began to crystallize, the unity forged by shared hardship and the hope for a cleaner, safer future. As the meeting drew to a close, Jake and Emma exchanged a glance, grim but hopeful. The road ahead was perilous, the forces arrayed against them powerful and unyielding. But the seeds of change had been planted, and the community was beginning to rise. Outside, the coastal wind whipped through the streets, carrying with it the scent of salt and promise. The injured dog, now resting quietly, had become more than a silent witness. It was a beacon of resilience, a reminder that even the smallest spark could ignite a blaze of courage. As Jake stepped onto the porch of his cabin later that evening, the weight of the day settled over him. The fight was far from over, but the tide was shifting. In the quiet town of Harborside, beneath the rugged cliffs and restless sea, a new chapter was unfolding, one written by those brave enough to speak, to stand, and to fight for justice. The morning air was crisp and sharp, carrying the faint brine of the Atlantic as federal agents descended upon Harborside. Their black SUVs rolled silently through the town's narrow streets, drawing curious glances from residents who had long lived in the shadow of quiet corruption. The somber hum of activity marked a turning point. A formal investigation unleashed upon the very heart of Redwood Corp. And the town officials who had shielded its illegal deeds. Jake watched from the porch of his weathered cabin, the injured dog resting at his feet, now visibly stronger. The flashing lights and the purposeful movements of the agents were a stark contrast to the town's usual calm, a signal that the tide of secrecy was finally breaking. Emma stood beside him, her eyes scanning the unfolding scene with a mixture of relief and resolve. Inside the town hall, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically in recent days. Sheriff Whitaker, once a figure of authority, was now under scrutiny, his complicity exposed by the mounting evidence. Arrest warrants had been issued, and several local officials faced charges of conspiracy and obstruction of justice. The community, long silenced by fear and intimidation, began to breathe anew, hope threading through conversations once mired in suspicion. News crews gathered outside Redwood Corp's headquarters, a stark, gray building looming over the harbor. Federal agents moved through offices, collecting documents and computers, their presence a tangible reminder that no one was above accountability. The company's executives scrambled to contain the fallout, but the evidence was overwhelming. Jake found himself at the center of the evolving drama, a reluctant hero whose persistence had ignited a chain reaction. The dog, once a silent victim of violence meant to bury the truth, had become a symbol of resilience and justice for the town. Its healing mirrored the community's own tentative steps toward recovery. As the investigation deepened, more residents came forward, emboldened by the federal presence. Whispers of bribes, threats, and cover-ups turned into testimonies and confessions. The network of corruption unraveled, revealing the extent to which greed had poisoned Harborside's waters and trust. Amid the upheaval, Jake and Emma continued their work, ensuring that the stories of those affected were told and that the evidence remained beyond reach of Redwood's reach. Their partnership, forged in quiet determination, had become a beacon for transparency and accountability. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low over the harbor, Jake received word that Redwood's CEO had been arrested while attempting to flee the state. The news rippled through the town, a dramatic climax to months of struggle. The once untouchable corporate giant was finally facing justice. Back at the cabin, Jake sat on the porch with the dog nestled beside him, the fading light casting long shadows. The weight of the journey pressed softly against the evening calm, a reminder of battles won and those still ahead. Emma joined them, her smile weary but genuine. "We've come a long way," she said quietly. Jake nodded, eyes on the horizon where sea met sky. "There's still work to do, but this town has a chance now, a real chance." As night fell, the stars emerged over Harborside, twinkling like distant promises. The community was scarred, but healing, its spirit rekindled by courage and truth. The dog, once wounded and frightened, lay peacefully, a living testament to resilience. The story was far from over, but the dark clouds of corruption had begun to part, revealing a future shaped by justice, hope, and the unwavering strength of those who dared to stand. The morning sun cast a gentle glow over Harborside, its light filtering through the tall pines that bordered the town and glinting off the calm waters of the harbor. The air was crisp, tinged with the salt and freshness of the sea, carrying a promise of renewal. After months of turmoil, the town was beginning to breathe again, tentative but hopeful. Jake stood on the porch of his weathered cabin, the dog, now fully healed, resting at his feet. The bond between them had grown strong, a quiet companionship forged in adversity. Around them, the town was stirring with signs of rebirth. Fishermen preparing their boats with renewed vigor, shopkeepers opening doors with genuine smiles, and neighbors greeting one another with a warmth that had been absent for too long. In the heart of Harborside, the community was rallying behind efforts to rebuild trust and heal the wounds left by corruption. Town meetings, once fraught with tension and fear, now echoed with collaboration and shared purpose. Leaders who had emerged from the shadows were working alongside residents to forge a new path, one grounded in transparency and accountability. Jake had taken on a quiet but vital role in this transformation. His military discipline and steady presence provided reassurance to those still wary of change. He partnered with local law enforcement officers committed to restoring integrity, helping to bridge the gap between the community and those sworn to protect it. Emma continued her work as a journalist, her reporting shining a light on the town's recovery and holding new leaders accountable. Her stories celebrated the courage of ordinary citizens who had stood up in the face of danger and highlighted ongoing efforts to safeguard the environment and public health. Together, Jake and Emma spearheaded initiatives aimed at environmental cleanup, mobilizing volunteers to remove debris from the shoreline and monitor water quality. The once contaminated bay showed signs of revival, its waters clearer and teeming with life, a testament to the resilience of nature and the community's dedication. At a recent town gathering, Jake addressed a crowd gathered beneath the towering pines, his voice steady and earnest. Harborside has endured much, but we've proven that together we can overcome. This is our home, and it's up to all of us to protect it. Our land, our waters, and each other. The crowd responded with applause, their faces reflecting a shared commitment to renewal. Children played nearby, their laughter weaving through the air like a healing balm, while elders looked on with quiet pride. In the evenings, Jake often found himself on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The dog lay beside him, a faithful companion and living symbol of the journey they had undertaken. The stillness of those moments offered a chance for reflection, a reminder of the path traveled and the work yet to come. Those scars remained, both on the land and in the hearts of its people. The spirit of Harborside was unbroken. The community's vigilance had deepened, a collective resolve to guard against the shadows that once threatened to consume them. Jake's thoughts often returned to the wounded dog that had appeared on his porch months ago, a catalyst for change and a silent witness to truth. That fragile life had sparked a movement, awakening a town to its own strength and the power of courage. As night settled over Harborside, stars shimmered overhead, their light a quiet affirmation of hope. The town, once gripped by fear and silence, now stood united, ready to face whatever challenges the future might hold. In the soft glow of twilight, Jake and Emma shared a moment of quiet understanding, a commitment to continue their fight for justice, transparency, and the preservation of the community they both called home. The story of Harborside was still unfolding, shaped by the hands of its people, guided by resilience, and buoyed by the unwavering belief that even in the darkest times, hope could prevail. The quiet of the Maine coast wrapped around Jake as he sat on the porch of his cabin, the last light of day fading into a soft twilight. The ocean's steady rhythm whispered against the cliffs, a soothing pulse that mirrored the slow healing within both the town and himself. The dog, fully recovered now, rested quietly at his feet, its amber eyes watching the horizon with a calm trust that had grown between them over months of shared struggle. Jake's thoughts drifted back to the day the wounded dog appeared on his porch. A silent, desperate call for help that had pulled him from solitude into the heart of a dark secret. That fragile life had been the thread that unraveled a web of corruption, leading to the exposure of Redwood Corporation's crimes and the long-overdue reckoning for those who had betrayed Harborside. The town was different now. The scars of deceit and greed remained, but they were tempered by resilience and a renewed sense of community. Neighbors who once kept their worries locked away now spoke openly, united by a common purpose to protect their home and each other. The harbor, once tainted by illegal dumping, showed signs of revival, its waters clearer and teeming with life, a testament to both nature's endurance and human determination. Jake reflected on the courage it had taken, not just his own, but that of Emma, the locals, and even the dog who had survived against the odds. Each had played a part in turning the tide, proving that even the smallest acts of loyalty and bravery could ripple outward to effect profound change. As darkness deepened, Jake rose and walked to the edge of the porch, the cool breeze carrying the scent of pine and salt. The stars above shimmered like distant promises, their light a reminder that hope persisted, even in the darkest nights. He thought of the lessons learned, the importance of paying attention to small signs, of standing firm in one's values, and of supporting those who risk everything to reveal the truth. The dog, once vulnerable and wounded, had become a symbol of that unwavering spirit, a beacon of justice and resilience that inspired the entire community. Emma's words echoed in his mind, a call to action that transcended the boundaries of their quiet town. There's always a story worth telling, Jake, one that can change the world if we have the courage to share it. Jake knew their journey was far from over. Challenges would arise, New threats would emerge, but the foundation laid by their fight was strong. The people of Harborside were awake now, vigilant and united, ready to face whatever came next. With a final glance toward the horizon, Jake settled back into his chair, the dog curling up beside him. The peaceful rhythm of the ocean and the steady glow of the stars offered a quiet assurance that together they had forged a path from darkness into light. The story of courage and redemption was theirs to carry forward, a testament to the power of standing firm and the enduring strength of loyalty. And as the night deepened around them, the call to share that story echoed softly, inviting all who heard it to join in the fight for truth and justice.